humanity. Keep watching the politics.
In a world where the quality of information available to poorer communities is doctored, tainted and sometimes regressive, where the words fake news have come to mean other people's opinions, it is vital to rely on news platforms with journalists who have feet on the ground and can report the truth. New York Parrot, a New York-based national and global news outlet, is changing the narratives of media operations. We focus on the news that matters, like self-empowerment, entrepreneurship, finances, health, security, politics, and more. We strive to curb violence, racial and economic discrimination, and to promote peace and socio-economic development of multiculturally diverse world. As we give voice to the people, we also give your business a voice and make it heard. Get your products and services off the ground by advertising on our fast-growing platform. With so much of daily visits to New York Parrot, you can't afford to be invisible to prospective clients on the website they trust the most. Our posts reach millions of people across the New York State and around the world. Advertising on our news site will unlock an audience of thousands of potential customers on your doorstep. New York Parrot is born to prosperously speak tomorrow for the voiceless.
Welcome to the Foreign Policy Review. I'm Dustin Pickering, your host, and today we have special guests, surprise Ian Kummer and Ben Toth. CARLO, Parcelli, and Billy Bob are with us in the studio. I'm going to bring these guys in, and we're going to have an excellent discussion of prognostications and about NATO. So just stay tuned, subscribe to our channel, and keep a watch out for more Parrot TV. Kicking it off to Billy Bob.
Thank you, Dustin. So, our last show, our Tuesday show, our new Tuesday show, we were discussing some likely fireworks that were maybe going to kick off in Ukraine after the 4th of July. And we weren't sure if there was just going to be a large, offensive, if there was going to be some false flags. We assumed something was going to happen, something big in the run-up to the NATO summit. And it appears that we're all wrong, because all the chatter, all the talk now is about how, nothing's going to happen, and we're going to go into the Vilnius summit with very little changing on the ground, which is good, because that's definitely going to conserve human life, which is good. But any thoughts on that panel? Because I would have put my money, I mean, not 100%, but certainly more than 50%, that Ukraine had something up their sleeve that they were going to deliver in the lead up to the summit. It doesn't look like that's going to happen. What are your guys' thoughts?
I want to kick it over to Ian Kummer, who is in Moscow, so he would know best. But I want to add again, I'm the context man, that Sergei Glazyev, who is the head of the Russian National Council, said as much. Everybody was talking for about 3 days about the ZMPP, the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant, which is under Russian territory, under Russian guard. And he said, I'm going to quote him, the impending defeat of the AFU and NATO behind it is pushing its strategists to a nuclear catastrophe with which they plan to cover up their failure. That is a very powerful man in Russia saying that. All the telegrams, Ukrainian and Russian, were all about the ZMPP, and not much has happened. And we have seen the blame game begun. Sorry, this is not in the cheat sheet, but I shared 2 articles side by side yesterday, because Zelensky gave an interview to CNN saying, well, I wanted to start this earlier, but those Western sponsors, they delayed the weapons and they delayed everything. That's why, well, I guess that's why we're losing and not doing anything. And there was just 2 months ago on the BBC saying we should delay. We need more weapons. We should delay. Just 2 months ago, he said we should delay. So all of that has come to nothing on the front lines. But what is the view from Moscow, Ian?
Well, it's hard to say, because that power plant, or even power plants in general, even before Zaporozhye was on the radar screen, people were talking about Chernobyl back last year. So it's one of those things. It's like the boy who cried wolf. We hear about a nuclear catastrophe every day, and we've been hearing about nuclear catastrophe every day for the past 18 months. Even before the SMO started, we were talking about there's noise in the media of a potential false flag, so it's not new. So there's no way to say it's one of those things that could be considered imminent, as it could happen now, it could happen tomorrow, or it just might not happen at all. So it's really impossible to say. I think both sides see the benefit in generating noise about it because they want to have noise in the media. So it's almost like they can say, I told you so, but there's no way to know for sure unless it, God forbid, something like that happens.
Well, Alexander, go, Billy Bob. Sorry.
Well, I was gonna say, I mean, Ian, if something did happen, in your opinion, what is the chances it would have been something the Russians did?
I would say the odds would be zero because it's their own backyard. They would have to clean up the mess. It's not beneficial, though. At the same time, it's hard to gauge how likely Ukrainians or NATO or some other third party is going to try something. It's very hard to gauge because that does permanently change the playing field once someone
even if we shed our bias, because I love Russia, but you don't have to. Just look at the characteristics from the perspective of rationality. Let's say they bomb it. They put these explosives on the roof, Zelensky recently said, and then basically satellite said, no, you didn't put anything on the roof. And Rafael Grossi, the IAEA's little snake, even he said, unlikely, we didn't see any evidence of explosives. Let's say Russia blows that thing apart. What's the benefit? The NATO coming in, the absolute ecological catastrophe on the soil that is now Russia, the fertile soil around it. What is the benefit to Russia? If this, it's zero chance. It's not in Russia's interest. It's just like, Assad when he was winning and killing the Al Qaeda guys. Then he gassed his people. That's the story people said because he's evil. I guess that was going to be the same story. I was just going to add the last one. And Alexander Mercuris is not right on everything, but he said, and he distinguishes carefully between fact and rumor, that there was rumors. And, he was a diplomat and a constitutional lawyer. His wife is an academic in contact with Russian academics. He said there was rumors that European leaders contacted Zelensky that if he is planning something like this, then don't. And the rumors say he agreed. I just wanted to add that. I speculation warning.
Well, we have to look at not just whether or not, of course, Russia would not at all benefit. We'd also have to ask about NATO, because the problem is if that power plant goes up, the only choice from NATO's perspective is, of course, they're not going to take credit for it. They're not going to say they did it. So they're either going to have to blame Russia or they're going to have to blame Ukraine. If they blame Ukraine, then that, of course, doesn't make any sense to support them anymore. If they blame Russia, then that's basically demands a NATO response, because that would be a major catastrophe that would affect, not just Ukraine, but all of its neighbors as well. So they would have to do something.
It makes sense for Russia to preempt that by calling it out. And so you see all the Russian Telegram channels, you see the Russian, official Russian politicians and diplomats preempting that narrative and saying, hey, this is what Ukraine is going to do. But yeah, in the West, so I saw Ben Hodges. He was on a podcast of a couple young kids. I don't know how that happens, but it's definitely not just young kids inviting him on. But he was on this podcast and he was saying, Russia's probably going to do this, and so it gives you pause, because when they're laying out the narrative, they're preparing it. And it reminds me very much like Ben said about in Syria, how when the chemical weapons that, Assad, because he's evil, he waited for the chemical weapons inspectors to show up, and then he launched his chemical weapons. So he's real.
He's evil.
It's counterintuitive. It's just nonsensical.
And then they sent Reuters journalists in to prove it, and they smelled a pipe, and they said, "Yeah, there's something very."
Oh, I saw one of those where he smelled a backpack. I mean, the backpack just smelled like chemical weapons. It was.
What else do you need? More evidence? Come on! And it wouldn't be the first case scenario, because Nord Stream, someone blew that up. Someone blew up the Kerch Bridge. Someone destroyed Daria Dugina and the other military bloggers. All of the the Russian flag on the Kremlin, and even that failed. But I want to draw attention to the fact that, as Shanika said, she calls it the West, but there's a difference between the CIA and the MI6, because the White House and USA, what do you call it? All the time, after the fact, a couple of weeks after the fact, said we had nothing to do with this. I wash my hands. That's what the US said. The UK never did it. And apparently, according to the leaks, the UK developed the plan to, for example, attack the Kerch Bridge, not to mention the Kakhovka Dam. So, yeah, I wouldn't rule it out. But apparently, maybe enough sane people said this is a catastrophe for everyone around you. I mean, just the, what do you call it in Chernobyl? The exclusion zone would be enormous. That's what I wanted to add.
Does anyone want to speculate on the other part of Shanika's question? What could be another alternative trick, as Shanika put it? I mean,
good question. It's very difficult because if you look at Scott Ritter and even McGregor and people like that, even the weapons arsenal, it just can't do anything substantive on the battlefield, which is what Zelensky needs for Vilnius. So he can only do these little terrorist attacks. Ian can talk about. There was an attack of 5 drones on one of the what do you call it, civilian airports in Moscow. And it helps, of course, that 4 of them were destroyed. 1 was brought down by cyber warfare, so it's secure and nobody died. But I think that's the last little trick they have left, just to show something. By the way, there's another little stream of thought we can go through, which is Zelensky's behavior throughout the last 4 or 5 days, which has been incredibly, increasingly panicked and erratic. But what else do you think? What do you think he can pull off?
Any thoughts, Ian? I have a few things, but what are you? Anything you want to get out there before I cut you off?
I think it's pretty clear at this point that NATO does not want to do some kind of unified response to Ukraine because, one, the window of opportunity to do that has long since passed. The best time for NATO to do something was when the Russian military was strung out all over Ukraine, when you could launch some sort of attack from Poland, from Romania. Right now, there's really no, a lot of the air power that we have in Central and Eastern Europe is just too far away, because everything right now is mostly happening in Donbass and southern Ukraine. It's far out of reach of most of our assets, except in Romania. So, and now you have a much larger concentration of Russian forces who are well dug in. Now it's the window of opportunity to do that conventionally has long since passed. So I think it's likely that they don't want. If there was going to be adding additional countries into the mix, it would be kind of an army of the willing type of situation, like possibly Poland might do something, right?
The 3 Baltic midgets. But then there was a countermeasure to that, which was Lukashenko and his nukes. That was a very effective countermeasure to these initiatives, I think.
Yes. So I think it's likely that NATO has just already ruled out the idea of even intervening. So that puts the ball in Ukraine's court, and if Zelensky, because that from the beginning they really want to direct NATO involvement, and so they have to. It's up to them to provoke it with a nuclear incident, WMD incident. So it's hard to say what's going on in those backroom conversations, but that's likely the dynamic that we have here. NATO wants to avoid getting involved, and Ukraine wants to pull them into it. Anytime you have a protectorate relationship, a small country that is under the protection of a larger country, there is always a motivation for that smaller the protector into their conflict. Armenia, Azerbaijan, Ukraine, no matter what country it is, there's always that motivation.
To bring in the US, that is still the dream, I think. Yeah.
Yes.
Correct.
Or we will start with Poland. We're okay with Poland, and we'll build up from there. Or Moldova.
There was a fantastic article, either WAPO or Wall Street Journal, saying the CIA's blind spot in Ukraine. And it talked about the very heavy involvement since before February 24th, 2022, and that the main staging ground for everything is Poland. So it really has become the new favorite ground for the US, and very willing to be that pawn in the game. And of course, the three little bolts, but no other country in Europe. I have put some good news out here from Hungary. Viktor Orban, either early this week or last week, has begun to talk about the world after NATO, which was fantastic for me. No, saying the country's defense has to look beyond alliances. I've never heard anything like that from him. He was very much, he got us into NATO, not into the EU. He is not a fan of the EU, not for a long time. But he was convinced that NATO is the strong defensive organization that can help us in any case. And I don't think he's convinced anymore. And I think most people in the organization are looking at Ukraine saying, I'm not convinced this little paper tiger can protect us. I mean, going into Vilnius with nothing to show for it, with all the weapons for 30 countries, that's going to be some very bad PR. Sorry if I shifted the topic.
I would question the premise that Hungary needs protection. I mean, who do they need protection from? I mean, and certainly
Ursula.
if it's from anybody, it's from the West. But
Yeah.
I mean, it's great. It's great. Hungary is, they're an obstacle to what NATO's wanted to do, and so they've performed, admirably. I share your enthusiasm for the Hungarian government.
I also worry all the time, because we've blocked
Carlo,
any further EU aid to Ukraine until our bank is unfrozen. But yes, go, Carlo.
I cut you off.
I share Billy Bob's confidence in Orban in Hungary, but that was a very interesting article, and one of the PowerPoints it talked about was the fact that some of these events have occurred without the tacit knowledge and understanding of
Washing
U.S.
hands.
intelligence. That was bold.
So
There's a lot of washing hands going on.
Yes. So an article I read yesterday said essentially the U.S. is worried that Ukraine is not going to listen to our warnings.
Yes,
right.
And even
So they're creating this narrative that Ukraine is doing crazy things off the leash, such as, and they're blaming, of course, Ukraine is being blamed for the pipeline in the, what was that one called again?
The ammonia pipeline that connects Germany. So not the gas one, but
no, the gas. I mean, I was talking about
Nord Stream.
Nord Stream.
Oh, Nord Stream, they're officially to blame. No, the pro-Ukrainian 6 guys on a boat, they're to blame.
And so I think we could still see a nuclear, the ZPP or the
ZNPP.
We could still see that go off, and we could see the U.S., starting to wash their hands from that. Hodges, as far as escalatory measures that Shaniqua was asking about, he's all about the ATACMS. The ATACMS missiles, because those are 300 kilometer range, and they could be launched against Sevastopol, against the Navy from Ukrainian territory. So he's really pushing that angle. And I think as the U.S., I'm not sure if they've yet officially declared they're going to provide ATACMS, but it's coming. I mean, it's obvious.
Yeah, it's salami tactics.
Just a matter of time if they haven't made the decision yet. But that's another way that they can, because like Ian was saying, the defenses are, the Russians are dug in. There's nothing they're going to be doing militarily to push the Russians back further east or south. So it's going to be, standoff weapons. It's going to be terrorist attacks, maybe something in Transnistria, maybe something in, Polish going into Western Ukraine. Up north by Belarus. So it's fun to speculate, but yeah, there's no window of opportunity anymore for reclaiming the Donbass, with a military invasion.
Looks like you have a YouTube comment.
I agree too. I just
Shaniqua, you're our best fan, and thank you so much for your commentary.
Thank you for being here. I want to say that there were two things chiming off in the NATO-oriented crowd, other than copium. One was ATACMS all the time. The second was cluster munitions, which is outlawed by all conventions, but still, that's what they're pushing. But just more deadly stuff. I just want to recount the history of this stuff. First, it was the HIMARS. It's going to be the new Wunderwaffe. They're jamming it. It's just done. You can't shoot anything with it anymore. Second came in the big First, it was the Iris-T, then the Patriot air defense system, and we saw them burn. Then it was the beautiful German tanks. We haven't seen the British one burn yet, but the Leopards have been burning. And obviously there was you probably know this, Ian Kuma, there's a Russian star, I forget his name, he's on the cheat sheet, who offered 1 million rubles to the first guy who destroyed the Leopard, and he dished it out. There you go. So it's basically, there was a warrant for this tank, and nothing has changed anything on the ground. There's three layers of defense in the Surovikin line, the General Armageddon line. They haven't reached the first one yet. And there are 500,000, this is a Scott Ritter number, if you want to know the citation, 500,000 Russian soldiers in the rear, training and waiting to be deployed anywhere. I mean, just imagine going up, what are those ATACMS going to do? But yeah, it's just the next wonder weapon, the next wonder
You
weapon.
forgot about the javelins. That was started like in 2014.
That was the first
We're
one.
not going to give them javelins. No
Saint
offensive
Javelin.
weapons.
They're calling their children Javelina. I think that was the big showpiece. I just wonder if they all thought this through. When going in, first Russia, doesn't have an economy. It's a petrol station with nukes. It's just going to crumble. Its military is out of date. They have no motivation. They're amateurs, and it turns out everything is the opposite of the initial projection.
The most surprising, I think, is the economic stability of Russia. I'm surprised pleasantly, and I think China gets a lot of credit for helping to stabilize.
Well, I don't know.
By the way,
China-
Elvira Nabiulina, the central banker in Moscow, she was also shocked by her success. So she was surprised how successful the
Ian,
country
give me
was.
some pushback.
Sorry?
Well, yeah. So I think even the Russians themselves were unsure how they were going to fare against the sanctions from hell, because they are very serious. They're record-breaking, and so yes, like you said, I think they were a little surprised themselves. And you can see from how the economy's been, inflation's essentially zero. I'd say out of all the industries, probably their car industry was hit the hardest. The prices got wonky, supply got wonky, but then it's readjusted. Western brands have been pushed out, so you now see domestic Russian cars like Lada Niva.
Moskvich is coming back after all those years.
Yes, so it's good. I would say as far as China, it's hard to say what's going on with China because, it's good that they were willing to buy and sell with Russia, but at the same time, they didn't really take a concrete side either. They have this, I think and that would have been the window to take a side, because it's unlikely, because the West did get hit by its own sanctions too. There was quite a bit of chaos here too, both in Europe and in the USA. So the USA could not. I don't think it would have even been possible to sanction both Russia and China at the same time. So if they were going to take a side and dare Biden to do something about that, would have been the opportunity, and it would have been the most powerful moment to make a statement that Russia's in the right. But they have not done that. So it's hard to say. It's hard to say what's going on with China. I think we tend to, praise China as a world leader, and, some of that credit's deserved, some of it's not. I don't, despite all the rhetoric, I think Washington sees China as an ongoing partner. They're not an enemy like they see Russia. Russia's the enemy. It's always going to be the enemy that they want to break apart. China's not in that boat. I don't know if that's a racial statement, an ideological statement, maybe some combination of that. It's like the opiate wars. They want China to do what they want, but they're not out to destroy China like with Russia.
I think there are parts of Washington, the European fond people who absolutely hate Russia and want it destroyed. But I think pretty much all of Washington is united in saying China cannot overtake us. We are going to subjugate them back to where they were. They're not supposed to. They can make our iPhones, but you can't advance in higher technologies where we want to go. But I want to say a friend of the show, Regis Tremblay, also had this concern, but China didn't do enough. And I think we sort of alleviated that pain, saying, look, what China needed was to be a masterclass in diplomacy, which it has turned out. And in the early phases, it didn't go either way. It didn't say, I support Russia. It didn't say, I support Ukraine. It had to do that because it had to maintain relations with 100 countries and nurture them and build them. And it has, as we can see, bringing peace to the Middle East. That is a gargantuan task that China pulled off. And I think the diplomatic assistance that China brings to Russia is humongous. And the weapon, 5 minutes till break, the weapons, weapons manufacturing that Russia brings to this equation, it's like a match made in heaven. So I don't think it's unequal.
I was trying to listen to Ian's criticism, if it was criticism. I don't even want to put words in his mouth, but I was trying to listen, and my internet messed up on me. So Ian, could you just repeat very succinctly, like what would you have liked China to do, and what is your main 3-sentence criticism that you would have liked to see China do? Because I'm very curious.
Not this. Well, I would have liked to see them, like Ben just said, like them to do more, take a concrete side, not just when USA-led bloc tries these votes to not just abstain, but to actually always vote in Russia's favor, to actually openly say Russia's in the right, rather than this down the middle of the road statements that they've done.
And I understand for some Russians, it's never gonna. That's not enough. I understand that. Yeah.
What about? I mean, would you have been happy if China would have given equipment or offered equipment?
Well, they don't even need to. I don't think Russia actually needs the equipment.
I'm with you there.
They need what they need is someone. What they need is actually serious voices, other world powers, to actually openly take their side. And my statement actually was that the perfect window of opportunity for China to do that was last year, when both Russia and the West were in disarray from the sanctions, because those sanctions did hit both sides. That would have been the opportunity for China to actually openly say that. The reason why that was the window is because I do not believe the USA could have sanctioned both China and Russia at the same time. We would have just kind of had to eat it, essentially. If China said, hey, Russia's right. And diplomacy, I think diplomacy is so overrated. Everybody now wants to be a diplomat. China wants to be a diplomat. Turkey wants to be a diplomat. Israel wants to be a diplomat. Everybody loves to have their limelight of being, I'm being a diplomat. Well, consider it like this, to consider like a personal situation. You have a husband and wife who are in a fight with each other, and you have all of their family and friends say, I am the mediator. That doesn't mean anything. If you want to participate in a meaningful way, say, hey, if you move out, if you leave your spouse, I'll give you some money, or you can stay at my place. That's the person who's useful in a marital dispute, not the person who says, I'm going to go on Facebook and I'm going to mediate between them. It doesn't do anything. And ultimately, even with the Middle East, what made the difference in the Middle East with Syria was that Russia and Iran sent military support when they were essentially, when Syria had basically no friends for a very long time. But
Saudi Arabia and Iran, that is a Chinese endeavor and accomplishment. But I agree, Russia had a huge, a huge hand in the Syria Accords that are still, getting towards peace with Erdogan. Yeah.
Saudis just don't want to be the people left without a chair. If it's a game of musical chairs, I think the Saudis are very good at always making sure they have a chair when the music stops. So,
well, yeah, they definitely saw how the wind is blowing. The polarity is coming, and they didn't want to have all their eggs in the U.S. basket. Plus, the U.S., definitely destroyed that relationship with their own behavior and their own, demands, and so. Yeah, I mean, Saudi Arabia, they're looking out for themselves, and good for them. And I mean, what more do we want from a country? Let's just end imperialism. Let's have people, governments doing what's in the best interest of their people, which is typically peace, prosperity, and getting along with the rest of the countries on the planet.
Amen to that. And after the short break, I think we managed it perfectly. We'll get back to some more diplomacy and other stuff.
Yeah.
World Inkers Printing and Publishing. We are the company to achieve your goal. World Inkers Printing and Publishing Company will be there to assist you with everything you need to get your work published and printed. We offer at worldinkers.com publication services, public relations and marketing services, digital and print, advertorial services, conferences and seminars, and digital marketing platforms, and World Inkers Network, a forum for writers to meet and to exchange ideas. Contact us at info.worldinkers@gmail.com. World Inkers Printing and Publishing will meet all your publishing and author needs. Keep inking with World Inkers Printing and Publishing.
So that was the 30 seconds I needed to get my to formulate a response to Ian. And so my basic thoughts and response would be that both Russia and China, and the entire world, has time on its side. Like, we are the ones that are in no rush to escalate any kind of military tension or situation or any economic war, right? So the status quo for Russia and China seems to me to be, ideal and beneficial. And so I think Russia and China both are opposed to escalation. And in that way, China, they're just, they continue to grow and develop and increase their economy, and their alliances are strengthening, with the developing world. And it's a slow progression away from unipolarism into multipolarism. And so in that way, it just doesn't I don't see the benefit for China or for Russia, to escalate. And for I just don't see, if China would have stood by Russia, and instead of abstained, but actually, voted with Russia, in the long term or even the short term, what tangible benefits that gives Russia? I don't think it gives them any tangible benefits. And it's an escalatory measure that is going to increase, the economic war and the hot war against Russia and China, and their interest lies in keeping it de-escalated for as long as possible. And eventually, the West is probably gonna keep they're gonna push the escalation. They're gonna keep they're gonna do what they have to do to maintain their hegemony. But we want to delay that as much as possible, and as long as that can be delayed, the stronger the Russia and China gets. So anyway, that was my
Billy Bob, on that point.
Ian. So
I don't know where Ian is, but I hope he can still hear us, even if he's not on screen, because I want to respond based on what you said to Ian, he said 1 year ago was the exact time to take a side when it comes to China, because the West was in disarray and Russia was in disarray. Well, look at it now. The West is still in disarray. I haven't followed the US for a long bit today, other than a story about white powder, but Europe is burning. There are 3 countries with larger bloody riots than anywhere else. So I think it hasn't much changed to the benefit of the West at all. I wish I could say that to Ian. He's back. He says in chat.
Oh, good.
So he should be on screen shortly.
Yeah, I was having internet issues. I unplugged my hardwire and I went to my Wi-Fi because my Wi-Fi seemed to be better, which is counterintuitive. But when I plugged my wired back in, it went out again. So all kinds of internet shenanigans this Thursday.
Yeah.
Hopefully they bring in Ian.
In the meantime, can I? Dustin needs to let him in if he's listening somewhere. I'd like to just run down a little bit of something it's a Schadenfreude. It's something that I enjoy, because Zelensky, that man is in real trouble. You can see it in his body language and how he talks. And I just wanted to say that July the 4th, he had Duda, the Polish president. He had Noseda, who is the Lithuanian president, in Kiev. Then he had Greta fucking Thunberg and Mike Pence there, right? All of these people, all of that going on.
A very motley crew.
A very motley crew. And then before the NATO summit, this was in an official a couple of days ago, he's kind of blackmailed NATO that he expects to be in. Nice to see you too, Baba Clay. That he has to be in NATO because he will not come if the leaders do not demonstrate courage, which is a kind of blackmail. Now he's going to be on the sidelines, but not in the meeting. And a day later, he kind of begged Joe Biden in an interview that he should be in NATO to boost the morale of the soldiers. He's just gone. I think it's dawned on him that he's the country he leads is a sacrificial lamb. I just wanted to enjoy that for a moment. And when speaking of Vilnius, I don't want to list all the people, but there was a list of 8 people to be the next general secretary of NATO. Obviously, there was the Spanish prime minister, the Swedish ex-prime minister. There was Boris Johnson threw in his hat, Ben Wallace, the British defense secretary. He had Rishi Sunak go and campaign for him in Biden's office in the White House, and he said no. And now he's actually rooting for Ursula von der Leyen, the wicked witch of the EU, to be the next NATO general secretary, which I welcome with open hands, because she drove EU into the ground like a fucking dart, and I hope she does the same with NATO. And then we can finally, it's not that long to go now, I think. That's what I wanted to say on that topic, but we can get back to diplomacy.
I wanted to see if Ian had anything, but what my point would be is I wish I knew what the different leadership would represent. Like, how would Boris Johnson lead NATO any different than von der Leyen? Like, to me, I have no idea. Is one more of a hawk? Is one more, does it signify that, it looks like this kind of a strategy will take place as opposed to this? I think they're all just puppets. And so it's hard for me to get excited about, one or the other, because I have no idea what they would signify, and ultimately they don't signify anything because they just do what they're told. But I think there is something to it. I think there's a reason why Biden prefers van der Leyen to Johnson. What that reason is, maybe it's more U.S. influence and less UK influence.
Good U.S. puppet, exactly, I think. But
other than that, what is the difference? What does the UK like to see happen that the U.S. doesn't? Maybe the UK is a little bit more hawkish. I mean, it's speculation.
They look more rabid. Kaja Kallas would have been perfect for that as well, because she's one of the little midget countries, and she would have been out for blood as well, just like
some rabid.
Oh. Yep, sorry.
Ian, we were disparaging you, so defend yourself.
No, we weren't.
Well, I would say to answer your question, I mean, from the American standpoint, I think NATO was always about the European front, because even in the military, I don't think anyone really, you never see NATO flags. You never see anyone really talking about NATO in or out of the military up until, I don't think that really even started changing. I mean, Billy Bob, or, feel free to disagree here, but I don't think anyone really even talked much in the USA about NATO until that started changing around 2016. Well, yes, he did. He did during the Trump administration. That's when it started to change. But I think in 2016 or even 2018, you could go out on the street in any American city and ask them, what is NATO? Some sort of trade or a treaty? I don't know.
There's a joke I heard in Scotland that NATO, that's what we call a guy who's lost a toe to diabetes. NATO.
NATO. Oh, no. But I think it's always about this symbol of unity and pan-Europeanism. It was always a sales pitch to Europeans. It was never really about Americans. So
I think it's an American project, especially an American arms manufacturing project. But
yes, absolutely, in the government, but not for the American people. It was always more aimed about, the vote. When did Hungary join NATO? Do you remember?
We became a country in 1991. I think 97, 98.
So that was always a sales pitch to people like Hungarians, to Europeans. It's like, NATO, this is what NATO can do for you. So, with Americans never cared about NATO. We didn't even pay attention to it.
99.
So it's always Stoltenberg or whoever takes his place. It's hard to even gauge how much political power he has. I don't even know. This is how much
there. You can't make military decisions. Not at all.
Right. So it's really, is it just a figurehead? Does he have actual authority? It's very hard to even gauge it. I mean, you can look on the internet and see what he's supposed to be able to do, but how much power does he actually have? It's hard to say.
Good question. I don't know. We know he was the face, Stoltenberg, for 4 terms straight. Maybe he's going to have a 5th one, but I don't know if he actually has rights for procurement, which is the main thing in NATO, to get more weapons and stuff, because Germany has been saying we're going to double our production. Then, we ran into some bottlenecks. We can't do that. Sweden said, we actually don't have TNT. We have problems with steel. We actually can't do all the stuff that we promised to do. It's all over Europe, this scenario. We're out. We don't know how to, we can't really produce massive quantities more. So what can a figurehead like Ursula von der Leyen do other than say, do more, do twice, double it? Russia is in tatters, I tell you. What else? What else can she do?
Yes, it's hard to tell. And I don't know, it's a lot of it's theater, a lot of it's a masquerade, so it's hard to say because, because just like Russia has been running out of everything since the war started, NATO's been running out of everything too. You see that headline every day. Oh no, Europe is stockpile's empty. Oh no, this stockpile. Well, I think the reality is that
the difference is the Europeans say that, The Germans say we're out. We don't have jets. The British say we can fight for 2 days. It's them saying it about themselves. Sorry, Ian.
Well, what they can do is buy American equipment is what they can do. So that's why I say neither side's realistically going to run out.
After the terrible PR in Ukraine, why would they buy that junk though?
Well, because it's not the man on the street's decision.
Have you seen the latest Ministry of Defense sort of pronunciation from Russia, which for me, it was amazing because it read like Medvedev. It didn't read like Shoigu. It was thank you for all the scrap metal sent from the British. We're really going to enjoy it. And we're going to put him in those washing machines we've heard about from Ursula. It was like this tone. I was like, shit, did someone fire Shoigu? Is Medvedev in charge? A lot of people were shocked by it, but it's really there. It's hardcore trolling now.
Yeah, so
they're confident though.
Well, the reality is that the USA was prepared for a large-scale conventional conflict with the Soviet Union in the 1980s. It was, thousands of tanks on both sides, 15 to 20%
of people. Yes,
yes, and everybody understood it. Conventional war, you send your aircraft, you send your tanks, you send your infantry. You have 15, 20% casualties just in the first offensive. So everybody understood that you will lose a lot of people. You will lose a lot of equipment. You will need to have more backfilled to replace it. So it's understood that. So this idea, I don't think is true at all, that the United States is not going to be able to keep this. Like, even if European partners drop out of the game, if Germany does say, okay, we're out, we're done, I don't see the USA not being able to continue sending mothballed equipment to Ukraine. You see, they have no qualms about caring about if the equipment is worthwhile or not. They will quite happily send MRAPs and Humvees. Vehicles are totally unsuited for a conventional war, but they'll still send it. But the Ukrainians, they just want wheels. They want something that has wheels and drives, and we have that.
Not the same with ammunition, though. That's in terminal decline. They've been scouring South Korea. They've been scouring Japan. They've been scouring allies in Africa to get some more of those 155 millimeter shells because they're just out. The EU.
You think that narrative is a little overblown, Ian?
I think it's overblown. Yes, I think it's true. I think what's going to run out is. And they keep that in the down low, how much they manufacture every year. And it's sure, even without building new factories, you can add more shifts. You can have 3 shifts a day just going 24/7.
So Scott,
we have to be careful not to. Yeah.
Yes. And it's in there. And remember, it is in their interest to say we are running out too. That's why I say both Russia and NATO has been running out since the beginning. It's in their interest to keep that fear, to keep that hysteria. Oh no, we're going to run out. Justified.
Yeah, true. We have to be careful with that. You're right.
Yes.
We had Scott Ritter on. I think it was the last time Scott Ritter was on, and he made a compelling argument. He said that the problem is the U.S. government is not interested in doing a long-term contract with these private, military corporations, military hardware corporations, and that the private corporations themselves aren't interested in investing in a tremendous ramp up of production without guarantees from the government. And the government is apprehensive to give a guarantee. And that's why there's an impasse. And that's why there's logistic problems and problems getting the hardware to Ukraine. But
True.
you know, I remember when he was saying that, I had some confusion. I was trying to figure out what he was saying, and he dropped out, or I dropped out, and then once I heard the playback, it made a lot of sense. You know, and that's a kind of a problem with capitalism and having a, you know, an outsourcing to private interests your military manufacturing. I think Russia doesn't quite have that same kind of a problem. Like Russia has their production nationalized for the most part, and they have very short supply chains. So the West, they've got a long way to send all that stuff, and they're having issues. But like Ian, I'm apprehensive to give too much credence to that, because like the capitalists, they know what their interests are, and they're willing to invest, and they have a lot of money that they can invest. But it's hard to say. I'm somewhere between Ian and Scott Ritter, I think. Like I think there's problems, but they're a little bit overblown.
I've moved towards Ian's position as well, based on what you've just said and Ian just said. So to kind of sum it up, there's a difference between Russia and US, between the military industrial complexes, because in Russia it's national. It is to serve the interest of the military, not the same as in the US. But the numbers can be overblown to confuse or basically do a psyop on the enemy. But third point, I wanted to bring in Brian Belletic's updates. And for the last 3 US, what do you call them, legal aid packages, it's been promissory notes. It's been just contracts. Yeah, we'll have to still produce them in 2024 to 2026. That is also a sign. That is the official readouts of these packages.
And Brian points out that there's not hard numbers on a lot of the equipment. It's
yes, and they used to be. Just a couple of months ago, they used to be hard numbers, and it's just left off. So I see a change there. But yes, we have to be careful with these numbers. Are very true.
And Scott made, okay. Well, just briefly, Scott made an interesting point too, that the United States arms makers, not only are they in it for the profit, but they're interested in much more complex, fancy, for want of a better term, weapon systems, which are too complicated, don't work, require a huge amount of training, whereas the Russian defense system and production is more practical. That's all I wanted to say. I thought that was a good remark on his part.
I would say, as far as that whole, because it's true with the private sector, they want a long-term guarantee. It's like with the Abrams tank. You know, they actually produced more Abrams tanks than we needed, because it's not a light switch you can flip on and off with that. But as far as supply and demand goes right now, demand exceeds supply. Even if Ukraine, for whatever reason, dropped out tomorrow, you still have Taiwan, you still have Poland. I mean, Poland asked for an order of 500 HIMARS. That's more HIMARS that are in existence right now.
Ask for an order is the key phrase here.
Yes,
right?
yes. So that's more. I mean, so even if you didn't have this situation in Ukraine where they're continually sending in more equipment, even if that stopped, you still have Taiwan, you still have Poland, you still have those stockpiles that are in fact apparently empty in Europe. You have a lot to keep those factories busy for a while.
Okay, my needle's moved a little bit, but I'm not that convinced.
How would Poland pay for that?
Well, they already have a pretty large trade deficit. That's my question as well. I'd say even the bigger question is, what are they going to do with all that equipment? Because having that large a standing army is expensive. So are they going to try to push into Belarus, or are they going to push into Germany? Are they going to say, hey, give us those 1.5 trillion in reparations? Or, maybe we'll just...
I wonder how the German leadership class feels about Poland at this moment. They've been very much antagonizing the East and the West at the same time.
Because large armies tend to get used. Very rarely do you have a large army that just sits there and doesn't do anything. So I think that should be concerning a lot of people. What direction is Poland going to go in? And that was the question when Germany mobilized in the late 1930s. Everybody kind of assumes they would, push east. Well, they did eventually push east, but they pushed west first. So I think it's anybody's guess what Poland decides to do with that army once they have it.
Good points. Good points. Many reenactments we've seen these past few years. I wonder what's going to go on with the Polish leadership. Jesus.
There was so many things that were said that I wanted to respond to, and now that Now that you're finished, I don't remember any of them.
When it
Well,
comes
it's
to
okay.
military tech, I want to bring in some other news, which is about China. And they apparently, in this whole decoupling thing, there's a lot of noise going on. They just banned the export, restricted the export of gallium and I think germanium. But gallium, and this I did some research on, is a side product of aluminium production. And if you look at the yearly production by country, they have 95% of all the gallium in the world produce it. And it's used in what is, I'm not a military man. Hello, Mr. Mercurius. What is used is in active phase radar system, which is on the F-35. It's on motherships. It's on Navy destroyers and everything, which would go blind without it. So I think that is a very well-positioned step. And just to cite those numbers, when it comes to aluminum production, the top 3 in the world, gallium is a byproduct. There is 64,000 tons, which is the world's. 36,000 of that is China. The second is India with 3,700. The third one is Russia with 3,600. Just look at the scales of that thing. And they said, okay, you really need this? By the way, they have this monopoly on 15 elements, but they just said this one, we're just going to pull this one. And I saw a lovely thread by a Chinese person on Twitter about this, saying, why would we throw the bucket at them? We're just going to do a slow boil of the frog, just heat it up a little bit a notch, and then we get to the crispy finish. I read, so I wanted to bring that in because
to be clear, that's a response, right? That's not an escalation of China. That's a response of Western escalation, and so I think that's been the their approach so far is they're going to respond to escalations and they're going to do a measured response, but they themselves are not going to escalate because again, I don't feel they have escalation isn't in their interest.
Yes.
The status quo needs to be maintained for as long as possible. When the U.S. decides, they're going to go to war, China will respond. And I think, again, I think that's the correct approach. But
first they banned the chips.
They're demonstrating that they have a lot of other ways to respond. There's 14 other elements they can withhold from the global market to the detriment of the NATO and the EU.
Yeah, true. First
the $1 trillion in bond that supposedly China owes Western bondholders. They can just withhold that.
I read about that yesterday, and that was something from like pre-communist China, right? That was like something from the 30s, I believe, where the government in China that was facing Japanese occupation raised money by borrowing,
right?
And now they're trying to stick that with the current Chinese government, saying, "Hey,
with interest,
you owe us $1 trillion, and we're going to use that as leverage." That was an op-ed in like the Financial Times or something that I read yesterday. I read about it yesterday, saying that it was like preposterous. It's like these think tanks are just dreaming up ways. How can we get China? Oh, here's a way. It's so ridiculous.
Serious question. I'm not sure about this. Did China get Lend-Lease in World War II? I know Russia got it, and it got 1/3 of what the Britons got. So very little Lend-Lease, and they had to pay back every bloody dollar, whereas Britain
they were an ally. They definitely got support to the extent that Russia did. I don't think so.
They got Lend-Lease. Maybe that's what this is about.
They did get military support. They did get military vehicles. I don't know if that was that's actually a very good question. I'd have to look that up. I don't know if that was part of the Lend-Lease.
The bonds they're talking about though was just money. It was just investments they received from it. I don't think it was arms. I think it was just cash.
Yeah, pre-revolutionary China against Japan. So before 1945. Yeah, interesting. By the way, they're the second.
And it might have been Chiang Kai-shek. I think it was Chiang Kai-shek probably that got that. And now they're trying to stick it with.
By the way, second most butchered army, I think around 20 million, but I'm just going to look it up.
Well, they did that with Nicaragua when when the Sandinistas overthrew the Somozas. The big complaint was that Nicaragua owed the Western banks, U.S. banks, all this money, and then the Sandinistas started paying it back, and the World Bank said that the Sandinistas were doing a great job. So the U.S. administration under Carter initially had to do a 180 and go, well, we better attack these motherfuckers because otherwise they're gonna be the threat of a good example.
We'll have to normalize relations. Yeah. We won't have an excuse or justification to destroy them.
Yeah.
Man, the threat of a good example is so old. It's like an 80-year-old excuse. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was gonna say it's not that different from Haiti, where the Haitian newly freed slave government had to pay reparations for freeing themselves back to their landowners.
They're
For-
still
it took them a
paying that
century.
back.
I think I already
They're still
talked.
paying France for that.
I think
Yeah.
I already talked about, but I'm going to
Yeah.
mention the British reparation laws, which took 100 years to pay. Just maybe 10 years ago, they finished it, and it was paid to the slave owners. It was amazing. Just
France,
amazing.
same thing with France.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Gangsters.
France on fire. I mean, people are saying all sorts of things about it. I would say don't rape Africa for 100 years and take part in colonial conquests of the US and complain when people come to you and prices surge and then the people eating, the food consumption goes down 17%. You're going to have trouble on your hands, but I don't think we're going to have a lot of time for that. So I think we could go 5 minutes left to some concluding thoughts. And I want to bring in a bit more China because at the UN, the Security Council, they brought up a brand new, what do you call it? A call, you know what it is, a vote or something, to call on the US and the UK to leave Syria and abandon all illegal sanctions against the SAR, the Syrian Arab Republic, which never happened before. Straightforward. So I think that should make Ian happy. That is a big move. And there's a second interview. I saw this on TV, and it was meant for the South Korean and the Japanese people, which I found just heartwarming. I had to share it in our chat. I'm going to quote it directly because it's beautiful. No matter how much you bleach your hair and operate your nose, you will never become American or European. You will never be considered Westerner. So keep your identity and independence from America so that together we can rebuild Asia. I have been waiting for those words for God, 30 years at least. I wanted to conclude on that. What are you guys' finishing thoughts?
Ian, sorry to put you on the spot.
No,
But we've been talking over you.
No,
We
no,
have-
no, it's good.
I'm guilty.
We all talk over each other. It's okay. I would say, as a closing thought, about the geopolitical situation in general, I think Vilnius, I think the NATO summit is it's not at all related to what's going to happen in the battlefield or what's going to happen in relation to sanctions or terrorist attacks. Because the reality is neither side is planning around those things. It's not important. It's in the 20, because really that summit's going to be in the 24-hour news cycle, and then it's going to be out of the news cycle, and that's it. No one's going to plan their military operations around that. It doesn't matter. There might be some important conversations at the summit, but those are going to be behind closed doors. Public statements will be designed just for public consumption. So I don't think so. If there is any big event happening this week, it's not going to be related to the summit. I don't think it'll even be planned to coincide with the summit. It's just going to happen.
Fair point. We got 5 days until the big media circus. 11th and 12th is Vilnius. CARLO?
Yeah, well, I could talk about something really off topic, if I might, that we
Sure.
didn't get to last week, and that was I wanted in a conversation we were having, I wanted to mention Rex 84 night train, which was a plan that was under the aegis of FEMA and was led by Oliver North in the Iran-Contra figure, and it was designed to use old military bases in the West, in Colorado specifically, to arrest thousands of protesters in the event that the United States invaded Nicaragua, a country at that time of 3.5 million people, and haul the protesters off. And I began thinking that in connection with Douglas McGregor. So I did a little reading on Douglas McGregor, and I realized that during the Trump administration, he had been in the immigration aspect of the Trump administration, and one of his suggestions was to shoot illegal aliens on sight.
Yeah.
You just shoot them. And I just wanted to I had more to say about it, but I wanted to just say that I think there's a real threat here that's being ignored by a lot of people, and the fact that the reason I didn't mention it is Rex 84 night train. All you would hear was conspiracy theorists. Well, I happen to know that's not true, because my wife and I have a relative who worked at FEMA at the time, and my wife was sitting down with him, and she mentioned Rex 84 night train. Now, I was doing a cable access television show at the time. We were mentioning Rex 84 night train every other week because the alternative press was hip to it. Of course, the mainstream media was ridiculing those prospects. But he turned around to her and he said, "How do you know about that? That's supposed to be top secret." And of course, it wasn't top secret, but it was obvious that he was working on it. We know that for a fact. So it's not a conspiracy theorist. It's theory. It was something they were actually doing, and I think there's a predilection to possibly do it again. And the people who would be targeted, you can already see the way they're locking up immigrants. It would begin with the immigrants, and it would probably spill over into people who were protesting the immigrants being treated in that fashion.
Probably.
So I think McGregor, for all of his wonderful work he's doing on Ukraine, has got to be watched very closely. People like him too.
Maybe next time we could
I
discuss
agree.
that. And also in connection with France, they just voted at Parliament to have people's phones camera and microphone activated without the person knowing. Macron wants to basically ban or control social media. That's a second very big, very serious attack on people. Not the physical one, but tune in next time and maybe we'll discuss these.
If Dustin's going to keep the camera rolling, I'm going to get my 2 cents. I'm just going to riff off of Ben's
Billy Bob can finish us off.
commentary. Because what was your point again, Ben? Real quick.
It was the freedom of speech aspect and the just unconstitutional snooping on everybody, and which is happening in France as we speak.
Oh no, I remember.
US.
So the quote from the Chinese ambassador about you can bleach your skin, and here's what I want to point out. So this is a great little paragraph from an article I read a couple like a week ago. So in addition to its overwhelming military arsenal, the American empire has another asset: its overwhelming cultural hegemony. Hollywood, Silicon Valley, Google, Facebook, Netflix. The force of cultural power is so great that tens of millions of people all over the world, even people whose countries have been devastated by U.S. bombs and military coups, are hypnotized. Many will hand over their sovereignty, their culture, their history, their dignity to be part of the consumerist amusement park that's being offered to them on their TV and iPhone screens. This power cannot be underestimated. And that's what the guy was speaking to. You know, he was speaking to this hypnotization, this willingness to, embrace this ultimate indignity, and just to be part of this consumerist culture. It's really problematic.
Take that thought with you. I think that's an excellent finishing thought. That's what we're fighting in Hungary, in Russia, this ideological hegemony.
Dustin, let us go for 2 minutes extra. Thank you, Dustin.
Dustin.
Ian, thank you for joining us.